a group of individuals from Essex had travelled down in order to rob a cannabis factory, which was just in a residential property. Very quickly, that situation became quite heightened. He had made a call, a 999 call, so it was all recorded and could be heard, and actually the murder was on that call. It grew and it grew. What started off with 5 defendants grew to 13 defendants. You know in major crime that when jobs come in, your home life has to take second place really, because there are long nights, early starts, and it's full on for particularly that period when you have people in custody. I'm really well supported in that role, in working part-time, and I'm able to manage and sort of juggle both aspects of my life really. I knew that I wanted to be able to come back to the police because it's a career that I'm really passionate about, but knew that I wanted to have that balance with being around for my children. If I want to be involved in those big jobs, if I want to be involved as a case officer, then I have to be able to be flexible, having spent 17 weeks away from home. So I managed to have the whole of the summer holidays off with my children, which was amazing. There is that flexibility both ways.
Welcome to More Than the Badge, a Kent Police podcast. My name is Inspector Ashley Price and I'll be your host today. Today's guest is Detective Constable Emily Hooper. Emily works in major crime and has been awarded Police Officer of the Year at the annual Chiefs Award. Well done, Emily, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Let's start with a massive congratulations on your recent award.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Tell me more about it.
So I found out I was nominated, I think, earlier this year, and then I think the ceremony was in May, so I went along with my husband, and there were lots of categories and 2 other people in my category, and it was a sort of an evening function which was really lovely. So my husband got to see kind of what I had been doing for the last 2 years, and of course what other people within the police do. So it was a really lovely evening.
So what was the case you won the award for?
Operation Sheldrake, which was an investigation into the murder of Jovan Pepai on the 4th of December 2021 in Tunbridge Wells. A group of individuals from Essex had travelled down to Tunbridge Wells in order to rob a cannabis factory, which was just in a residential property on an ordinary street in Tunbridge Wells. So they had come down in convoy, broken into the property, and in the course of breaking into the property, they'd alerted Jovan Pepai, who's within the property, that they were there. He'd called other people who were obviously involved in that cannabis factory, who had attended the scene as well. So very quickly, that situation became quite heightened. When the others arrived, who were an Albanian gang, they arrived to the property. 3 of the individuals from Essex had locked themselves upstairs with the cannabis grow and with the victim. During that period, there was an exchange between them, which one of the defendants from Essex, he had made a call, a 999 call, so it was all recorded and could be heard, and actually the murder was on that call. So Mr. Pepai lost his life, and that was recorded, and that was obviously evidence that was played within court, which was difficult for people to hear. When I came on duty, that happened over a weekend when I was off duty, and when I came on duty on the Monday morning, I was asked to be case officer for that job, and at that time we had 5 individuals in custody who were linked to that offence. I love being a case officer. I love taking cases to court, so that I jumped at the opportunity really. I was really excited to be involved in that. I think I very quickly knew that it would, in major crime that when jobs come in, your home life has to take second place really, because there are long nights, early starts, and it's full on for particularly that period when you have people in custody. But as case officer, that role kind of continues because you have deadlines to serve evidence. So it grew and it grew. What started off with 5 defendants grew to 13 defendants. The investigation, including the trial, because there were 2 trials, it was split into 2. Originally it was to be heard at Maidstone Crown Court, but they couldn't accommodate that number of defendants. So we had to split the trial between Loughborough and Brighton. So in January 2023, I had a 10-week period where I was at Loughborough Crown Court. So I would leave on a Sunday night and get home on a Friday night. So I only really have very short periods at home over a 10-week period. And then the same in the summer for Brighton. So I was there for 7 weeks. So I think it was 17 weeks in total that year that I was away from home. So my husband had to do the majority of the childcare. So it was difficult for him, really difficult, and difficult for me to be away as well.
I can imagine. And as a result, how many convictions did you manage to secure?
So over the 2 trials, all of the defendants were found guilty of conspiracy to rob. 3 defendants were found guilty of murder, so the 3 defendants that were locked upstairs with the victim, and then there were 2 others who were convicted of manslaughter. So really good result. I think we got over 150 years of sentences with them all combined. So a good result for Kent Police and a good result for Jovan's family. I think quite often, you know, the concept, what people think about victims, obviously our victim was involved in the drug world, was involved in growing cannabis, but ultimately he'd lost his life and he had a family. He was a son, he was a brother, a nephew. So no one deserves to lose their lives, whatever their life choices are. So I think it's about understanding that we will do a good job. Whatever people have done, that doesn't matter. You know, we have to serve the public, and we will, and seek justice for those, you know, that are victims of crime.
Wow, and well done to you and your team for doing that.
Yeah, it was a good team,
So what inspired you to become a police officer?
I made the decision to join the police while I was still finishing my degree at university. I'd always been interested in the police. Definitely, I kind of have a real drive to help other people, and I think that's probably what motivated me the most. I haven't got any police in the family, so it was totally new to me. Nothing that I'd ever anybody that I'd really had much contact with that had been in the police. So yeah, definitely new for me and my family.
Did you find it difficult? Because I don't have any family police officers in my family, so I found it very unique that some of my family were really. Did you feel the same?
Yeah, I think I did, and I think probably as I've gone through the police through the years as well, difficult finding they're obviously very interested in what I do and have loads of questions for me, especially off the back of court cases, and it's difficult to understand, I suppose, that interest because it's something that we do every day. But genuinely, I think people who don't have an involvement in the police, they are really interested in what we do and how it works, what we deal with, particularly with all the programmes and things like that there are out there now. You know, people's interest is high. And
also probably people think we could do weird and wonderful things, when actually that's only television, isn't it?
Yeah, very different to TV, absolutely.
And what made you become a detective? Because officers can make a decision if they want to stay in a uniform role or a detective role. What made you go through a detective route?
I joined in 2007 and I spent 2 years in uniform and with my patrol team, who were an amazing team. I was really lucky with the officers that I joined with. They were really supportive, very hardworking. So I had a really good exposure to uniform life. But I think I knew quite early on that I was interested in investigation, in court, in going to court, taking cases to court. So I, very early on, within that 2-year period, asked for an attachment to what was child protection then. And I had, I think, a week or 2 weeks attachment to child protection, and then knew that that was really the kind of pathway for me, and it went from there.
And it's quite good, isn't it? Because within this job we can ask for these attachments and see if we like those particular roles, and that's obviously paid off with yourself doing an attachment on the detective route.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was really lucky because there was quite a lot going on during my attachment, so I had a real exposure to what child protection was like. Sometimes the attachments, we have a lot of people have attachments in the major crime team, which is where I'm based now, and it really is dependent on what comes in because we're quite reactive in there. So some people get a really good exposure, but if they have an attachment and nothing much does happen, it's definitely worth, if operationally they're able to come back again at some point and keep that interest up.
So no doubt your career has evolved since 2007.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about some of the roles you've done in a bit more depth and what you liked about them.
Yeah, of course. So after I was in uniform, I went to child protection in 2009, and I stayed within that role for around 10 years. So I joined major crime in 2019. I was really passionate about child protection. I still am, because there's crossovers of it in major crime as well. Multi-agency working is so important, particularly in child protection, but in policing in the whole. I think I just wanted to be able to sort of help those that are very vulnerable and can't often speak up for themselves. And there's no one more vulnerable than children, really. So I was lucky to be in that role for so long, and I enjoyed it. I dealt with lots of cases that went to court, primarily kind of involving historic child sexual offences. So really important work and in protecting other children as well in the future. So something that I'm really proud of, definitely.
So Emily, you're a detective in the major crime department. What's major crime?
So major crime is a department within Kent Police where we investigate murder, attempt murder, stranger rape and kidnap, those kind of acquisition offences. So we're very reactionary when those jobs come in. So there's two teams of us. There's one at Folkestone and then there's one at North Kent as well. So we have officers, as detectives, we would be expected to go out and carry out inquiries, take statements, speak to witnesses, obtain CCTV, review phone downloads. There's so many different aspects to being a detective in major crime. So I think that a real important sort of trait for somebody who wants to be a detective in major crime is that you have to be able to speak to people. Technology is evolving all the time, and it is really important in our role and in policing in general. And lots of our cases, we get fantastic evidence from things like CCTV, from phones, but it is really important that you can still speak to people. Witnesses are important, and having, the public confidence and public support is paramount really to what we do. So there's lots of aspects, lots of going out and doing things and doing inquiries, completing inquiries. It can take you to different counties on inquiries. There's also lots of work that you have to do in the background to produce reports that potentially and eventually will end up in court, so giving evidence in court. So you get exposed to a lot in major crime. So it's a really fantastic and enjoyable role if you're interested in being a detective.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
So other than being a detective, and a good one at that, what other things do you do?
So another role that I carry out quite regularly is a family liaison officer. So when somebody has lost their lives, so when we're investigating a murder, the victim's family will have a family liaison officer, so they'll be the family's point of contact throughout the investigation, throughout any subsequent trials and court cases. So we're there we act as a conduit between the investigation and the family. So we're there to support the family, we're there to investigate. So there may well be situations where we have to ask the family questions about the victim and about the life of the victim in order to assist the investigation. I've done it multiple times in major crime, and it's one of my favourite roles as well. It's really important that the family get a good service and that they have a point of contact, because often there can be lots going on within a murder investigation, and particularly nowadays because there's so much on social media and stuff that's reported that's not always factually correct. So it's important that the family have a point of contact within the investigation team so they know what they hear from me or from other family liaison officers. That's the truth, and that's what we know as far as the investigation is concerned. So it's a really important role for them, and it doesn't kind of just... It's a role that goes on throughout the whole process, so it's really important that you're dedicated to that role, because it can mean that you're away again at court for periods of time, because I work part-time, so when court cases come up as a case officer or as a family liaison officer, I have to work full-time because that's what that role needs, and it's just having that understanding. But I think within Kent Police, certainly over my career, the flexibility is amazing within the police, and I'm really well supported in that role, in working part-time, and I'm able to manage and sort of juggle both aspects of my life, really, because I'm supported well.
You're doing so much as a detective and a family liaison officer, and you said you're part-time.
Yes.
How does that work with the organisation being part-time?
I began being part-time when I came back to the police after having maternity leave after my first daughter. So I knew that I wanted to be able to come back to the police because it's a career that I'm really passionate about, but knew that I wanted to have that balance with being around for my children. So I came back as part-time, initially to my child protection role. And then when I joined Major Crime in 2019, they were able to keep that flexible working pattern in place. And in the main, it works really well. I think you have to understand that there does need to be a level of flexibility on my behalf as well, because if I want to be involved in those big jobs, if I want to be involved as a case officer, then I have to be able to be flexible. But although it has meant that at times I've had to work those days that I'm meant to have off, I have had, flexibility given back to me. I just had the summer holidays off, so that was kind of promised to me by my superintendent after having spent 17 weeks away from home. So I managed to have the whole of the summer holidays off with my children, which was amazing. So there is that flexibility both ways.
Obviously you hear certain things that happen with children, abuse and the like. How do you manage a home and work-life balance?
Yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult at times. It's not always easy. I've got a lot of support at home. My husband's very supportive. I've got family and friends. But I've always had really supportive colleagues. I've been really lucky with the people that I've worked with over the years, not just within the police, but within the Crown Prosecution Service, barristers I've worked with. So I've always had a really good network of people that I could speak to, particularly within the police, and I think that's really important.
I describe it as more of a police family.
Absolutely, it really is. It really is.
And that's comforting, isn't it? You have your pressures with your role, and I have my pressures with my role, and it's so important to have perhaps closed door sessions or phone calls with your close colleagues, isn't it? To have that work-life balance, because without that, it'll be more of a harder job than what it is already, do you think? Yeah,
absolutely. And particularly, I think, rank-wise as well, I've always had very good rank structure, and, my sergeants, my inspectors, my DCIs have always been approachable, and I think that's really important because, you need that network around you, definitely.
Yes, absolutely. So how do you manage yourself with the emotional impact of the cases you deal with, and perhaps sometimes taking that home with your own children?
Yeah, of course. And I think it's really important to have those two worlds separated, but it's not always possible. I think all of our experiences in life shape the people that we are, shape the police officers that we are probably, and the parents that we are. So I think probably I'm definitely very protective of my children because of what I've been exposed to. But yeah, you're right. It is about finding that balance, because you don't want to push that too far one way. My husband isn't in the police, so he's able to give perhaps a more balanced view on some things than I maybe am. I don't know. It seems to work.
Good. So is there a moment or a particular call or incident that that stays with you? Maybe a proud moment in your career. Of course, you've just been awarded Police Officer of the Year.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that stays with you?
I mean, that was a really humbling experience and something that, I am immensely proud of. In Major Crime, we are a team, so there was a team that I worked with, but it was very nice to kind of have the comments that I had. So it was really humbling. But I think probably the court case results, there's nothing quite like it when you get guilty verdicts, particularly when you've put such hard work in and when the families have been forced to sit through days and days of evidence and hearing what's happened to their loved ones and the victims themselves. It's a really tough process for them, and they're very brave to come forward and to speak out about crimes that have happened against them. So I think it's really important to celebrate that and to know that they've sought justice and they've got justice and they've been believed, they've been listened to. So yeah, those court results will probably stay with me.
And a lot of these cases go on for many years, don't they? So it's quite... How do you motivate the family to keep going after so long and many years of the cases? Yeah,
it can be really difficult, but you just have to maintain that contact when you can. Not all victims want to have that constant contact, particularly when there's long drawn-out periods where you're waiting for advice or you're waiting for lines of inquiries to be completed. So I think it's just, again, about listening to the wants and needs of the public and who we're dealing with, and just knowing that we're there if they've got questions, and that we're a support network for them as well, and putting them in contact with other agencies that can support them too is really important.
And are there any common misconceptions that you've seen or heard about policing?
Yeah, I mean, that over the more recent years, there's been a really difficult period for policing. I think, well, maybe I'm wrong in saying, but particularly for men in policing, with misogyny, those kind of characters that have really brought the kind of police name down. And I think it's so important to understand that there may have been cultures like that, but actually for most of my career, I've never come across staff or other officers that behave in that way, maybe luckily, but I'm really proud of the police force that I work for and the other police officers that I work with. I think those misconceptions are hard, and if people have experienced that kind of behaviour, then it's difficult to overcome that for other people. I think it's just about continuing to strive to do your best and to treat people in a way that I always police, in a way that I would hope my family, if they needed the police, if they had to call on the police and needed our help, I try to deal with people how I would want my family to be dealt with.
And I take it quite personally as well when there's another officer in the media which has done something, because we work so hard, don't we? We all do. Police officers and police staff work so hard to maintain the integrity, and then it takes one person, doesn't it, to bring it down, and then quite hard to bring it back up, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. It's really difficult, and this is a really good way of showing that there is another side to policing, that we are human, because quite often you don't really hear about the good stories and the good things that we've done. It's often obviously more interesting for people to hear about when we've messed up or got things wrong. So yeah, it is upsetting, but I think we just have to continue to try and do what we can to eradicate those views, I guess, as best we can.
Has there been a moment in your career when you've realised the risks of what you do?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep your home life and work life separate, which is difficult sometimes because it is a role that encompasses our lives sometimes. We can be off duty, but we're never off duty. If we see something happening, then we have to do something, and of course we do. I think probably when I'm with my children, that's probably more evident, because you feel more vulnerable because they're only young and they're your priority. But of course you have this role to carry out as well. I think when I was in child protection, we often had to go to concern for welfare calls, or if children have made disclosures during the school day, we would have to go out to see them. And that was quite a difficult thing to do, because you're acting quite reactively to what children are saying, of course, and listening to what they're saying. And then you have to make a decision, a really difficult decision, because you would never want to leave a child in a situation where they're at risk. But of course, in child protection, our role would include us having to take children into police protection, which is a really difficult thing to do, particularly for parents. It's never easy, and for children. So that was a real hard period, I think, in my career, when I'd have to make those decisions.
And I've done that myself on a frontline policing role, is child protection and police protection powers we have to initiate. Now, I don't have children.
Yeah.
So I guess for an officer like yourself to actually do that when you've got children yourself has got to be harder.
I think so, yeah, I think it is. I think definitely coming back from having had children, there are certain things that perhaps I understood more, and then maybe other things that I would think differently about. And I think it is difficult, because if that ever happened to me, that I'd be devastated. So you know that's not an easy thing for anyone. Whatever's happened within a family home and whatever the risk is, you know, people's children are their children, and that's a very difficult
hard,
decision to make. Yeah,
and not a nice one.
No.
I take no pleasure in authorising child protection or anything like that. But those powers are there to be used,
of course,
if need be, and we're quite strict in relation to when we do utilise those powers, don't we?
It's not a decision
we're
you
all
take
human, aren't we?
lightly. Yeah, absolutely.
So off the cuff questions now. What's your go-to snack?
Well, sadly, biscuits. Probably it shouldn't be. Far too many biscuits.
Which
sometimes.
One in particular?
I do like Jaffa cakes, but once you start, it's difficult to stop. No, the biscuit tin in our office definitely gets hit if we're off late. But yeah, probably biscuits.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
If you was a superhero, what superpowers would you want?
I'd love to be able to, obvious one, I'd love to be able to fly, but one of my things that I'd have always been interested in and never really taken the time to do is just to learn more languages. I'd love to speak all languages, so you know what people are saying when they think that you don't know. So yeah, that would be one of my superheroes.
Do you speak any at the moment?
No, very poor French.
I was going to ask, but we'll leave that. I won't ask you that. If you used to choose any celebrity to go out on patrol with, who would it be?
Celebrity-wise, I absolutely love Alan Carr, so I think it would have to be him.
I can hear his laugh now.
Yeah, I can in my head. And loads of my colleagues would comment on my laugh, so I think together we would have probably quite a good shift.
What's one thing you wish the public knew about being a police officer?
I think how hard we work and how much it kind of takes of our own lives and our own sense of self, I suppose, because you are exposed to the most awful situations in people's lives. You know, we're privileged to be able to step in and to help people when they're at the lowest points in their lives, but also it's really difficult, and we are only human and we do have our own lives and families. So I think it would be to have that understanding of you know, who we are, that we're not just a uniform or just an authority. We are people, and we want to do our best for others. And
hopefully by doing things such as this podcast, we'll show people that we are human.
Yeah, hopefully.
So what advice would you give for anyone wanting to join Kent Police as a police officer?
I think definitely look into it, go to recruitment drives if they can find out when they are, research it, speak to as many people who are serving currently or not serving. You know, retired police officers, they have lots of stories to tell. It certainly is an interesting career. No 2 days are really the same. So I think if you have that interest in it, then definitely go with it. When I joined, I had to do an exam, which is a multiple choice exam, but lots of revision went into that. There's lots of reading to do. Quite often you can get given time within work time to do that, but it is, again, lots of your own time that has to go into that, understandably, because of operational needs. I then had to do a portfolio. I don't know if it's different now, but there were certain aspects of policing that I had to demonstrate. So interviewing suspects, interviewing victims, lots of taking statements, and that can be evidenced in products that you produce in your work, and also from other officers who witness you doing that. I then had to have an interview, and then I became accredited. So it sounds like it was a quick process, but it wasn't, and it is hard work, but it's really rewarding.
And you're right by saying no 2 days are the same. And it's kind of a cliche, isn't it, with that? Because I'm sure you and I didn't think a month ago we'll be doing something like this.
No.
So it is different, isn't it, every day in our individual roles?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook and LinkedIn, where we'll be posting previews of our up-and-coming episodes. You can watch this episode by subscribing to our YouTube channel and find out more about the variety of opportunities available by searching Kent Police Careers. See you soon.